Welcome to Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the golf instruction podcast that helps you take control of your game. Now, here's your host, the founder of Par Breakers Golf Academy and certified Golf Channel Swing Fix instructor, Bernard Sheridan.
So we'd like to welcome Pete Buchanan from Plain Simple Golf. And Pete, welcome to the show, Breaking Par.
Thanks for having me. I'm great to be on.
I'm glad to have you. So what we're going to talk about today is of course instruction. That's what the podcast is about, and trying to get it out to the masses. And I know that I've looked at your site and I've seen some things, and your goal, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your goal is to try to get the golf swing as the least moving amount of parts as possible, make it as simple as possible, so that the average player, the beginner player, or the average weekend player can get better at the game quicker. Correct?
Absolutely. We developed Plain Simple Golf. I spent about 15 years with the John Jacobs Golf Schools and was able to really get to a lot of people and give a lot of lessons and really see what the basic fundamentals of things that help them and don't help them are. And so we decided to simplify the swing down and really take out the components that, really they don't need, and just keep the ones that they do, and try to make it as simple as possible. The masses are the ones that probably have the least amount of time to practice. And so we want to be able to get them to a better game as fast as we can with as little practice time as they need.
That's true. I find that myself too, and I try to break it down into 5 simple steps, and with my students. So what I want to say is the majority of the players that you're dealing with, are they intermediate players, or are there some better players who come to your facility?
I have a whole range, from tournament players all the way up to beginners. So I've had the whole range of players. I've got several guys that are playing mini tours in Florida, a couple of guys that have asked me some input from the PGA Tour, that I wouldn't be their coach, but they've asked for some input on what I have to say about the swing. And for me, it's the majority of my players would be anywhere between 8 and 25 handicaps, although the 25s don't stay there very long. They come down pretty fast. And
I think that's the same for me too, is that I find that same thing, is that the bulk of my players are somewhere between that just getting into single digit, and then up to like your average weekend warrior, which is probably like a 20 to a 25. So with those folks, what are the main things that you're working on?
I basically look at 2 things that are very important. The posture to me is number 1. They've got to get them in a good, sound, fundamental posture so they can actually move in balance. My swing is really based on what the hands and arms and the club are going to do, and I use the posture so that the body will move efficiently on its own, so I don't really have to concentrate on what it does, especially in the forward swing. The backswing, there's some turn to it because there has to be horizontal movement in the swing, because the ball's to the side of us as well as on the ground. But I like to use the sound fundamental piece of posture so that they can start to concentrate on moving the golf club and let the body react to it. So I'm a little bit of the opposite of what's going on today. A lot of today's instruction is about, the hip turn and the leg drive. And, so many of the players already have the face open. And the last thing I want to do is make it more open. If you drive the legs and really get them out in front or turn the hips in front, most tournament players are doing that to keep the face from over closing. Well, when you've got players that are slicing, that's not what they need to do. They're going to continue to slice if you do that. So I really work at getting the golf club back to swinging in the right plane. That's where the plane came from, and obviously trying to keep it simple. But I've also developed, and you may have seen on the website, a training aid that actually helps keep the face square the whole time. That way I'm not dealing with curves. I can get the club face square and keep it square to the direction the club's moving, and then I can really concentrate on the direction that the club's swinging with the arms after that sound fundamental posture.
So, and for our listeners, what is that exact training aid called?
It's called the Simple Swing Repeater, and we call it SSR for short. Basically, what it does is when you set up at address, there's an angle formed between your lead arm and the shaft, and our SSR holds that angle in place for the entire swing, so that there's no hinge or lag. There's just no movement in the wrist at all, and that way, if you're going to return to the angle you started at, I always felt it would be easier to do that if you never left it. A lot of times when you get a lot of hinge in the backswing and trying to create lag coming down, it creates an opportunity that tremendous time to square the club face. And it's hard to do. You watch it on television on the weekends. You see a tour player hit one to the right off in the trees, and then the next hole he hooks it off to the left. The masses are trying to just get the ball in play, and we figured if we could take that movement out and leave it as it is, it's going to make it more productive, repetitive swing for them so that they can move the golf club more efficiently and really get to where they can control the ball much easier.
Now, is that a training aid that if they go to your website, they can purchase?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. Because that's important that if there's training aids out there, and that's part of the questioning that I usually ask is what training aids, are there any other training aids that you use other than that you would recommend to students?
That's the only one I use because I've done a lot of research, and I've always been a big training aid skeptic, and still to this day, a lot of people are saying, I can't believe you designed one. And I said, well, this one does what I wanted to do. So I had an idea of what the swing should be and how to simplify it. And then I wanted something that when my players left and I wasn't behind them, I knew they would continue doing exactly what I've asked them to do. And that's been the basis of what the Simple Swing Repeater has done. There are many of them who have purchased it. I'm not there physically, but with the DVD that comes with it, which has 4 lessons on it from putting, chipping, pitching, and the full swing, they're able to see exactly what I'm after for them to do. And then they can continue on and make the improvement on their own, which has, been a great benefit. We've had a lot of players make a lot of improvement with just the product itself and moving forward with it on their own.
Now, with the bulk of your students, what do you find is the overwhelming problem that they have?
I would say more than anything else, there's too much forward body movement in the forward swing. From the top of the swing, the shoulders and the hips move out in front. For most of them, it's trying to make room for a previous curve. And they just get so far out ahead of the golf club, they can't get the club back efficiently enough. So we really work hard at getting the posture right, getting the fundamental movements of the backswing correct on the right plane, and then they can swing the arms freely down into the ball and around the other side and let that motion pull the body around to its balance. A lot of times people will say, well, you only teach swinging the arms. And I said, well, look at the finish of every one of my players. They're all facing the target. I just get to the finish in a different fashion than most instructors do as far as how they explain it. I allow the plane, the arc of the swing, to move the body. To me, it's more efficient that way. It's more productive that way. And I've been out there, with the golf schools, we tried to count one time. I've probably given 50 to 60,000 lessons, and I've seen what they can and cannot do. And so trying to really work at moving the lower body and legs and driving them is just a part that's hard for those masses to do. And I can tell you, if you ask an amateur player to turn their hips, their shoulders are going to go with them. They have a hard time separating those two. So a turn to them is turn everything. And for the most part, they're slicing it off to the right anyway, so they're desperately trying to make room for the curve. So we're just trying to get the golf club back to square. And once we get it square, the rest of it gets pretty easy.
And this training aid that you use helps them do that a lot faster?
Oh, it happens within minutes. We don't allow the hands to move around, so they can't manipulate the club face anymore. And so some of them, it takes them a little bit because their compensations they can no longer use because a lot of them would protect a swing that had the club face off by rotating their hands or some extra hand movement at the bottom. They can't do that now. But once they learn to swing the arms in the right direction, the ball flight just comes into a nice, easy area right away. And when we get a good fundamental posture going, now they hit it straight and solid. And once you hit it straight and solid, it's not hard to figure out where to swing the club as far as direction.
Now, when you have students work on different things when they're not with you, is there specific things that you set up for them to work on each week? Is there a specific amount of time that you like your students to work on things? Or is it just basically as much time as they can do it as they can get in?
Well, we try to work it around the amount of time that they have. I mean, if it's an hour a week, an hour every 2 weeks, 3 hours a week, depending on what it is, I will give them specific drills for what I feel needs the most work. It's easier for them when they have the training aid on because I can get there faster. So what used to take, a few hours of time now takes, a few minutes. So they can get repetitive motion a lot faster because the training aid keeps them doing the same thing over and over again. So, I try to work within whatever parameters they have, and I have drills specifically for each area of the game, from putting to chipping to pitching to bunker play to the full swing. And so I will give them those drills and say, these are the things I want you to work on for this amount of time per week until we get back together and we can continue to move forward. That way, every time I see them as they've advanced down the road. We don't have to start over again. A lot of times you give somebody something to do, and then when they come back, they've reverted back to where they were. This way, with the training aid and the practice they do, they're always advancing forward.
So when they work on different things, like here's a good example. Do you take students out on the golf course too?
Yes.
Okay, so when you do that, are there specific things that you do as a pre-warm-up round?
Absolutely. The first thing I'll do most of the time is get them to hit little short shots, 50 to 25, actually say 25 to 50 to 60 yards. And we're using a warm-up so they can start to see how the arms are going to work and getting the parts that they're going to be using to control the ball warmed up first. So many times when you're standing on the range, you see somebody drive up and they walk up to the spot, they pull the driver out and they hit, 50 balls for the pleasure of about 4. And then they go to the first tee and wonder why they can't find the fairway. So I'm going to warm them up and get them to control the ball first, and then we move to the golf course from there. So to me, warming up before a round is simply that. It's not to work on your golf swing. It's to warm up your swing. It's to make movements so you know what you're going to be doing. And then when you're finished with the round, that's when you go work on what you had trouble with.
Great. And I totally agree 100%. And I try to get a lot of my students to not work on any kind of drills. I have a warm-up drill that I have them do that's kind of what you're doing there, which is a smaller swing version to get them feeling all the things that have to happen. Then I have them move to a full swing and then just look at what the ball flight is and work with what they have today and not worry so much about, I need to be this position or I need to be that position. So, and I'm finding that a lot of other instructors are doing that, and hearing you say that too, it's great for our listeners because they can get reinforcement that this is really the better way to do it, not go out there and work on trying to hit a certain spot or trying to make a certain ball flight happen, or because it might not be happening that day.
You're absolutely right. I used to get a question all the time. They'd say, how far does your 5-iron go? And I say, well, today it's this yardage. I don't know what it's going to be tomorrow, but I know what it is today. So each day is a little bit different.
Well, I think that a lot of amateur players, they believe that things aren't different for professionals, that they're pretty much hitting stuff the same distance every single time. And of course, what I think they kind of, because professionals play at a higher level, they kind of think that they don't make a lot of these mistakes. And then I think also because when you see them and you watch it on TV, they're not showing a lot of the mistakes. They're showing the good shots and the highlights. They're not showing the bad things. So they have to understand that professionals have bad things happen too, and if they didn't, they'd be, everybody would be it'd be a big log jam at the top of the leaderboard every week, but it definitely is not that way.
Well, on most of the people who are watching on Saturday and Sunday, you have to remember half the field isn't there.
Yes.
They didn't make the cut. So, they're seeing those that are playing the best at that time during that particular tournament, and they have the luxury of only showing you the best shots. One of the things I really like about watching the British Open is they happen to show you all the bad ones, especially when you can ever get a hold of the BBC coverage. It's kind of fun because they'll show you guys that are hit 4 or 5 out of one bunker. I mean, it's obviously not fun for the player, but at least us as fans can look at it and say, you know what, that's a really hard bunker to get out of. It's not that easy.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's not that often that they show the bad shots, and I think it's just because it's they don't want to portray that as what professionals do. They want to and they're also only going to show the guys who are at the top of the leaderboard. They're never going to show the guys who are somewhere in the middle, because people get bored with that for some reason, unless they're just so love golf so much that nothing about it is going to bore them.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's obviously great for TV. I mean, you have to have the things that people want to see, but if you really want to get an idea of what the tour players are really about, just go look at the stats. I mean, you would think that the best players in the world, they would be averaging 90% fairways and 90% greens, but you're going to find that they aren't. And so that's one of the things that I've always said about the instruction is, I think there is a way to simplify it to make it better so they can hit more fairways and more greens. But when you really look at what's going on, the top ones are in the 70, 75% range, and you'd think it would be higher, but you're seeing just exactly what they're up against.
That's true. That's very true. So what do you believe is ideal for the average player to spend on their game? If there was an ideal time and they had unlimited amount of time, what would be the ideal amount of time for them to work on their game?
Well, one of the things I just did is I did a 30-day challenge this past summer, actually toward the end of the summer. And in that 30-day challenge, I asked them to practice 3 hours a week. And I split it up between putting, chipping, pitching, and the full swing. And I think 3 hours a week is a lot. And a lot of players would have a hard time, getting that much time. And it really was beneficial because in that 30-day challenge that we did, now this included my simple swing repeater training aid. They had that to use. The lowest amount of improvement in those 30 days from a reduction on handicap was 20%. And we had one player who, I think at once maybe broke 100. Within the 30 days, shot 75. So I think 3 hours is a really good amount of time, especially if there's specific things that they're doing. I mean, just hitting balls for 3 hours a week doesn't do you any good. You have to have a certain specific set of things that you're working on for those 3 hours to be very beneficial. Now, we had some that didn't practice all 3 hours and still made tremendous improvement. But I think somebody who's really got the time, like you said, if they really have the time to spend, 3 hours, I think is a good amount of time per week. Some might say that's not enough, but you know what? I want them to go out and play. I mean, it's all about playing golf. And if you've got the time to play, go play. But I think if you're specifically working on specific drills that you've been given, 3 hours a week is a good amount of time.
Yeah, I agree with the play part. I know that for me personally, as a player, I was never big into practicing a lot. I was more, the way that I would practice is I would go play, because it would put me in live situations that I would be facing on the golf course, which I can't always face on the range just due to the fact of different lies and things like that. It's hard to actually, emulate those type of situations that you're going to run into on the golf course. But I find that, too, that there's a lot of players who don't have, of course, that kind of time. So if they don't, would you suggest maybe a small period daily? I know that for my students, I might say, look, if you just work on this for 10 minutes a day and then go play your round of golf on the weekend, then at least instead of not doing anything for 4 or 5 days, if you spend 10, 15 minutes a day, like right after dinner or something like that, do you think that something like that would be a better way for them to chip away at that practice time that they don't really have a whole lot of?
Oh, absolutely. Any time they can spend is going to be beneficial, especially if there's specific things that they're trying to do. There are pieces and drills that I have with the simple swing repeater that don't require hitting a ball. So there's so many of those they can do that they can do it in the backyard. If they've got a high enough ceiling, they can do it in the living room. There's specific moves that they can make that 10, 15 minutes a day would make a tremendous dent in what they're trying to do.
Now, there's a saying, it's called drive for show, putt for dough. So I don't know whether that saying is actually true, as I've been looking at a couple of different things going on with statistics. They're saying that is starting to become I want to say, something that is not as important, the putting side, as it is of actually hitting more fairways or your long irons and things like that. How do you feel about that?
Well, if you're going to make a four on the hole, I think the most important shot's the fourth one. It has to go in. Otherwise, you're making a five. In the end, you have to putt it in the hole unless you're holding them from the fairways, which we don't see happen all the time. So putting is one of the biggest pieces of the game, and it's one that you really can't neglect. It can save you more shots than any other of the clubs in the bag. A driver, you hit 14 times. If you set it up the way the game is, to two putt every green, you're supposed to putt 36. So you putt twice more than you drive. So I would think that the putting is something you can't neglect. There's a proper way to roll a ball, and that does sound funny to roll a ball, but if you can really get where you have a sound fundamental putting stroke, you can make up for a lot of errant shots on the golf course. So I would have to say that I know today they're talking about distance, and you got to hit it far and get it out there a long ways. But in my experience over the years, it's never the length of the golf course that's given me trouble. It's the width. It's not wide enough for the errant shots. And so I think the short shots can really make up for a lot of other things in the game. So I would always say putting is very important.
So when you're in your lessons with your students, is that part of the game that you give a good amount of lessons in, or do you find that most of the time you're working more with full swing?
As in late, we've been working a lot with the full swing. With the simple swing repeater coming out in the last year and a half, we've really concentrated on a lot of the full swings. But the one bonus with the training aid is when we get on the putting green, it doesn't take very long. I can get those putting strokes going in a repetitive basis really fast because they can't move their hands around. So it makes a great, shallow, very level stroke right off the bat, and they get to roll the ball efficiently. And so it doesn't take long at all to get the putting strokes going. So I do spend some time with it because I think it's important.
So, and they're using this training aid in putting then too, correct?
Absolutely. It works for every shot in the game. It's one of those unique training aids that you can actually put on and hit every shot in the game without having to take it off.
Nice.
And I have a lot of players that play with it on. They say, you know what, the heck with it. I hit it so straight, I'm going to keep it on. And I don't care what my buddies say. Even had one group where the guy insisted that he got to play with it for 18 holes. And after they got done, the other three called me and said, hey, we got to have one of those. He killed us today with that thing on. So now the whole foursome plays with it on the whole time, which is great because they're having a much more enjoyable round of golf. They hit the ball in play, they keep it in play, and they're just having a blast. And the four of them are playing against each other, so what difference does it make? So, and a lot of times too, I'll have somebody say, well, the tee shot on the 14th hole just I just can't seem to get it. And I said, well, put the SSR on there, drive out to the 14th hole, get to half a dozen balls and strike them off the tee. Get to where you can see that you can put that ball in play. And then when you're out there playing the next time, you got the confidence to just step up and hit it. So, yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, look, it was great having you with us today. We're kind of coming to the end of our segment here. And so before we leave, there's just a couple more questions that I'd like to ask you. And one is, as a quote that you live your life by, and that you would like to see your students kind of live their life by, what would a quote be that you would try to say to them?
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Right. So don't overcomplicate anything. Try to keep it simple.
You got to keep it simple. And the other thing was it's a little bit longer, but I would always say never forget what the ball's telling you. Because I teach all of my students to watch the ball and let the ball tell them what the impact was, and then that reverts to what they're doing. So I always teach from the ball to the club to the person. John Jacobs taught me that, and it's I think it's the best way to go. I think if you teach the other direction, you're going to run into problems. You really need to understand what the ball's telling you and how to use that cause and effect to be able to quickly fix what's going on.
And what is the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you directly?
our website, planesimplegolf.com. It's PLANE, just like the swing plane is, and that's why we named it after that. But planesimplegolf.com, all the contact info's out there. The different academy programs and teaching programs we put on, the SSR is out there. The SSR does have its own website also. It's psgssr.com, which you can get to from our main website. But that way you can find out everything and all the contact information for us out there, and the different instruction we do. We also have a video analysis program we do, and I work with players all over the world. They just send in videos, and I do the recaps and send them back.
So, and they can find all that on your website.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for being a guest today, Pete, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime, and maybe I'll run into you at the show or something like that.
You bet. I appreciate you having me on, and it's been a pleasure.